We're going to dive into one single, absolutely critical year, 1520. This is the year that a German monk named Martin Luther goes from being a reformer to a full-blown revolutionary. It's the year his break with the Catholic Church became, well, permanent. So what on earth happened? I mean, think about that for a second. How does one guy manage to create a split with an institution that's been the center of European life for 1,500 years? We're talking about the spiritual, the political, the cultural authority. How do you make a break so deep that it can never ever be fixed? Well, the answer isn't what you might think. It wasn't with an army or some massive political rebellion. Not at first, anyway. Nope. Luther's weapons were his ideas, and he unleashed them with just ink and paper in a series of writings that took a sledgehammer to the very foundations of the church's power. So there was this little window of time, a brief pause in his trial from late 1519 to October of 1520. And Luther wasn't just sitting around waiting, he was writing. And the speed at which he was pumping out these works, it's just incredible. Just look at this timeline. It's relentless. A major new work is coming out practically every single month. It's like, while the folks in Rome are busy debating what to do with him, Luther is building his case, piece by piece. He's writing to the German nobles for political support, and at the same time, he's crafting these theological bombs aimed right at the heart of the church. And the biggest bombshell of them all that year was a work called The Babylonian Captivity. Now, this wasn't just some light critique. This was an all-out assault on the very source of the church's religious power, the sacraments. You see, for centuries, the Catholic Church had 7 sacraments. Think of them as the 7 pillars holding up the entire building. They were these sacred rituals that were believed to be the exclusive channels of God's grace, and only the clergy could administer them. They governed your entire life, literally from the cradle to the grave. And what Luther did next, well, he basically walked up to those 7 pillars and lit the dynamite. He argued that if you actually look at the Bible, there aren't 7 sacraments. There are only 2. It was just this stunning, revolutionary act of theological demolition. So what was his reasoning? Well, for Luther, it was simple. For something to be a sacrament, it had to be something Christ himself set up in the Bible. So baptism and the Lord's Supper, they stay. But confirmation, marriage, extreme unction, gone. And the really critical ones he threw out were penance and, crucially, ordination. Getting rid of ordination as a sacrament? Whoa. That was a direct shot. Because by attacking ordination, Luther was attacking the whole system of sacerdotalism. He was basically saying that priests don't hold some special mystical power from God. They weren't a separate higher class of Christian. And with that one idea, the whole clerical caste system just starts to crumble. And in the place of that crumbling system, he proposes something completely new. One of his most powerful ideas, a totally different vision for what the church is supposed to be. This quote just says it all, doesn't it? Luther argues for this idea of the priesthood of all believers. He's saying that through baptism, every single Christian is a priest in God's eyes. There's no longer this spiritual wall between the clergy and everybody else. A priest is just a minister, a member of the community chosen to serve it. It was a radical democratization of faith. But this created a really interesting tension, a puzzle right at the heart of his own theology. See, on one hand, you have the Lord's Supper, which he said requires personal faith. That points to a church of individuals, a gathered church of true believers. But on the other hand, you have infant baptism, which connects the church to all of society. Every baby is baptized into the community. And he never quite resolved that tension. Is the church for the truly devout, or is it for everybody?
So while Luther is publishing all of this revolutionary stuff, you can bet Rome was not just sitting on its hands. The waiting game was over. The gears of the papal machine started turning, and this time with deadly seriousness.
And you can just feel the shift in tone. Listen to the opening line of the papal bull they issued against him. Pope Leo X doesn't call him a confused monk. He calls him a wild boar that has invaded God's vineyard. The language itself tells you everything you need to know. The time for debate is officially over. Now, even in Rome, this wasn't a simple process. They actually debated it. The theologians were pushing for a swift condemnation. But the canon lawyers, they argued that Luther deserved a proper hearing. Just like God gave Adam a chance to explain himself. The compromise they reached is really telling. Okay, no hearing, but we'll give him a 60-day deadline to take it all back. So the final bull comes out, and it condemns 41 of Luther's statements. And they use this really vague formula, labeling them heretical or scandalous or false. It was kind of a way for the committee to condemn them without having to agree on the exact reason for each one. The churches were all over the map, from questioning the Pope's power all the way to siding with a previously executed heretic, John Huss. And so that was it. The line in the sand was drawn. The bull gave Luther 60 days from the moment it was published in his area to submit completely. The clock was officially ticking, and it was ticking towards excommunication. So this brings us to the climax, right? The bull is slowly making its way across Germany. Everyone is holding their breath. How is Luther going to respond to this ultimate threat from the most powerful institution on earth? Well, Luther himself was torn. I mean, he was all over the place. At times, he was just furious, writing things like, "Why don't we just attack them with weapons and wash our hands in their blood?" But then, his more dominant mood was one of faith. He truly believed this was a spiritual battle and that God was on his side. He told his followers to trust, reminding them that not a single leaf falls from a tree without God's knowledge. But in the end, maybe the sharpest take on the whole year of 1520 didn't come from Luther or the Pope. It came from the great scholar Erasmus. When he read Luther's attack on the sacraments, the Babylonian captivity, he just said it simply, "The breach is irreparable." He saw it instantly. With that book, Luther hadn't just picked a fight with the church, he had destroyed any chance of ever making peace. After 1520, there was no turning back. One man with just ink and paper had redrawn the map of the Western world forever.